Hello everyone, happy Monday. So it's apparently Bat Appreciation Day. So I'm just having to finish off one little tweet. Um, the Bat Appreciation Society. The only thing I like about Windows 11 is the fact it tells you about little things like this. It's the only useful feature. I absolutely hated going over to Windows 11 because so many things that I used to be able to do on Windows 10 and previous versions couldn't do, and it's caused me no end of problems. And yeah, but that's quite good. It says, "Did you know today is this?" No, I didn't. Thank you very much for telling me. But anyway, there's quite a lot of things going on today, but geopolitically and domestically. But I just thought, let's have a little look at the fact that Trump has finally moved on sanctions. He's actually applied some material sanctions onto Russia. Now, America, of course, has had sanctions on Russia for a while, and Trump didn't remove them, to be fair, but he hadn't applied any new ones. And this is something for which there is cross-party support in America. We'll just get rid of the bats now. We've done that. There's Republicans who've drafted sanction packages months and months ago, and Trump go no, 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 no. Whereas now he's actually applied not the full suite of them, but that may not actually matter because, again, I mean, what's ultimately happened here is the way Trump was playing it back in January, February was he looked at it this way, right? There's a war going on between Russia and Ukraine. He doesn't care who's in the right and the wrong. That's irrelevant to him. And in all honesty, that's just geopolitics. That's not even just Trump. Most countries are going to take the view what action is in our national interest, right? But he looks at the situation and says, well, we need it to stop, and Russia doesn't want to stop, and Russia's more powerful in his head. And so I'll just squeeze Ukraine's balls and then they'll have to surrender. He obviously didn't understand what that meant. He had no concept of what that meant for them. So he didn't realise that this was not going to happen no matter what Trump did to them, right? He could literally take away all support and they can't surrender because that means their own destruction, right? So so eventually he came over to this. Eventually, it's taken a long time to come over this idea that Putin will not come to the negotiating table, that he wants to keep this going. So he's now applied some sanctions on Russian oil and gas, on two particular companies, which, are significant because it should cause at least India to reduce the amount of Russian oil imports. Now, this, of course, does come at a cost to everyone because it has caused the price of oil internationally to go up. Because, of course, it does. That is what happens if you restrict supplies on the world market of something, the price is going to go up. Doesn't matter whether other countries can increase output and maintain supplies, it's irrelevant. The price will go up anyway. We saw that after the initial full-scale invasion in 2022, when Europe massively cut down on the amount of fuel it was getting from Russia. Supplies were maintained globally. Europe was just able to get those supplies elsewhere, but it still massively increased the rate. Even in Britain, like Boris Johnson would say, "Oh, we don't get much Russian gas." The price of electricity still doubled, though, didn't it? No one asked. Not many journalists asked him about that, then, did they? So if we're only getting, I think it was something like 3% of our gas from Russia, why have our prices doubled? Why have our energy prices doubled? Boris, tell us that one. No one really asked him that, but it's one of these things. It's going to come at a short-term cost, but at the end of the day, what is the cost to our economies, all of our economies, from this war continuing? It's created huge problems in Europe as well as Western countries in general. But Ned just said about the Windows thing there. I like having tabs on command line, but otherwise disaster, just like other versions of Windows. What I don't like is the fact that it's at the bottom. I used to like putting it on the side. Can't do that. Can't do it. I'm getting another. I mean, I have another computer. It's actually downstairs. I've already ordered it, and that will of course have Windows 11 on it as well. So I'm going to have to like reset up Windows 11 on a new computer. But that's a bit. It's a bit involved because I have to wipe this one. Well, I have to first of all get off the files I want first. Let's not forget that. Then I'll have to wipe it. That takes quite a while to do it properly before I give it to someone. And then I'll have to set up the new one. So I'm hoping to do that tomorrow evening. But again, you know, we will see. But yeah, interesting because there's quite a lot of things now. I mean, there's part of me that does not like. You try and think a few years into the future, and you just think, you know, in 3 years' time, are we still going to be looking at a stalemate in Ukraine? I don't think anyone's suggesting that Ukraine will have complete control of all of its territory anytime soon, again. Because I'll tell you where I worry now, because here's the thing. So, and I've got a video coming out later on today about this as well. So in terms of Russia-Ukraine, you've got... So Russia's economy is struggling, right? Its coal industry's collapsed. That was huge. These sanctions, there were already sanctions. Sanctions are already in effect. They've already been squeezing Russia's economy. The latest sanctions will squeeze it further. In fact, because Trump, and the thing is, you ask yourself, so why is Trump now putting so much effort into this? It's two things. First of all, he's seen that Putin is not going to come to the negotiating table anytime soon. Secondly, there's profit in it for at least America, if not himself personally. He'll usually make sure he gets a slice of the pie because America is a producer. So Europe, if it can't get gas via the pipelines, Nord Stream, coming from Russia, where does it get its gas from? It needs it in the form of LNG, doesn't it? Well, America can supply that. America wants to supply that. So that is one of the sort of things we've had, the carrots we've had as Europeans to try and persuade Trump more to our side. How much LNG will Russia buy off you, Trumpy mate? None at all, because they're producers. Good one. We're not producers. We'd like to buy gas, right? Now, do you want us buying it from Russia or do you want us buying it from America? So really, it's been put in those terms to Trump, I think, behind the scenes. So economically, Russia could collapse really quite quickly, or it might, I don't know. But it could easily, the signs are there that it could actually collapse really quite quickly. Then there's signs in terms of the military. The military is completely dysfunctional. I have got a video on later today on that, on the latest on that. It's a complete mess. And I know we've always known it's a mess. It was a mess from the start, but it really is. Now, it's like running, according to some report, and you have to rely on reports, what seem to be independent expert reports. But it does seem to be running on vapours. There's signs that Russia, in terms of its military production, it's a production of physical hardware, is now prioritising your day-to-day stuff like artillery and drones, not so much longer-term stuff like planes. So that analysts are suggesting, this suggests that Russia now, it's not even just that it can't resource the functioning of the state proper and it's pumping all its resources into military production. It can't even manage to focus its resources on military production. So it's having to prioritize on the stuff they can make quickly that's needed on a day-to-day basis in the field. How much longer can they carry on with that? But I'll tell you where I do have a worry. Because you look at it and you think, okay, if the army could actually collapse. I mean, my question is for this afternoon is, which happens first? Does Russia's economy collapse or does Russia's military collapse? Because they're literally just sending people into bullet fire, hails of bullets, because they haven't given them proper resourcing at all or proper training. It's mostly conscripts now. A lot of, the professional Russian soldiers are no longer around. Many have been killed, others badly wounded. So then you think to yourself, okay, so something collapses and that forces Putin to have to sue for peace, right? But that's where I see another danger. Because as soon as Putin decides to come to the negotiating table, it's not like, right, he's beaten, Ukraine can then say, right, get out of our land. Putin will go, well, no, I want to keep these bits. And Trump will back him. In the interests of ending the war, Trump will back him. So there is still danger to come. I still struggle to see how we can actually help Ukraine win all of its territory back in anything like a reasonable amount of time. But at the moment, you know, you would just settle as an interim thing, just like in, you know, in Palestine, you settle as an interim thing that the bombing has stopped, I think. Israel keep threatening it again and keep shooting the odd person still. But by and large, the mass deaths and starvation, I mean, there's disease and stuff like that. I mean, it's all still screwed. Whereas Ukraine at least have infrastructure. So if the war stopped now, they could actually rebuild. As long as the fighting can stop, and, you know, not on Putin's terms, whereby Ukraine don't have any forces or European support. But I thought that was quite interesting. In terms of other stuff, however, in terms of other stuff that is going on today, have people seen this? Right. So, coming back to Britain. First of all, I actually just put this out. I do think this is important to point out. If anyone is a private tenant in England, this only applies to England, but if you're a private tenant or you know someone who is, do bear in mind there's new laws have come online from today. The Renters' Rights Bill is still, it's nearly there, but it's still technically passing through Parliament. But there's a couple of laws have actually gone online today, which mean to do with AWAB's laws. So for those who don't know, this was a kid who died because their home was had dangerous levels of mold in it, right? So respiratory problems. And so now from today in England, if you're a private tenant or you know someone who is, if you notify your landlord of an emergency health and safety situation, they have to fix it within 24 hours of being notified. If you've got significant levels of damp and mould, they have to investigate it within 10 days of being informed. When the investigation is concluded, they have to fix, if it needs fixing, that is, if it has to then be fixed within 5 days. And either way, they have to write to the tenant about the investigation within 3 days after the investigation is concluded. There are a couple of other bits and pieces in it as well. So it's worth making sure people are aware about that there are actually more rights today. But the other thing, just in terms of they're saying we've got our domestic reform idiots to deal with, I'll leave the war to Starmer and co. Well, yes, on that front. So in terms of reform, will reform win the next election? There's still a lot of people not taking into account many headways coming their way. I keep saying that. But the key dangers are obviously Reform UK themselves. There's 3 key dangers. Reform UK themselves, okay? But they are absolutely collapsing in local government. And remember, where they've won in local government this year, these are the very places where reform support is strongest. So, yeah, there might be some of those people go, okay, these reform councillors are shit, but Nigel Farage will know what he's doing, so they might still vote them in national elections. But maybe some will have pause for thought, right? As well as various other scandals. And now that Labour seem to be attacking reform a bit more, maybe that will work. I still say, because your second problem is Labour itself, Labour are very, very poor at actually tackling Reform UK. Their communication is really bad. Who is going to enforce these tenants' rights? Same as anything else, there's an ombudsman. So if your landlord, but there is a legal duty. If your landlord doesn't deal with it, you would go to the ombudsman. And they will fight your case for you, as long as you can evidence the fact that you notified them and they didn't respond in time. Where was I? Yes, so second problem is Labour themselves. Can they improve their comms on this? Labour, to be fair, have made it clear, and there is evidence that they are doing this. Remember, they've said even before the election, before Reform UK were in the position they are now, when they were only ever realistically going to win a few seats. Labour's position was the best way to deal with Reform UK is to make sure that people have a better standard of living. Because remember, the main source of support for Reform UK is not actually as a result of immigration. It's cost of living. It's living standards. Farage has persuaded people that living standards and people like him are being hit by... I mean, Rupert Lowe was at it again, saying, oh, we don't need more money for the NHS, we just need the immigrants gone. Well, there's only so many immigrants using the NHS as patients because most migrants are economic migrants and therefore they're fit and healthy, working age, which means they rarely need the NHS. The vast majority of use for the NHS is small children and elderly people, right? But also, we rely on massive amounts of immigration for NHS workers. There's a large percentage, is it something like 20% of workers in the NHS, frontline workers, are migrant workers. As people keep saying, and it's absolutely true, it's not just a saying, it's absolutely true, you are more likely to be treated by a migrant than find yourself behind the queue with one. And then the other point, of course, to make is that migrant workers pay more for the NHS than we do. You know, we pay our taxes, so, you know, funding for the NHS comes from general taxation. So that from most of our point of view, that means our income tax, our VAT that we pay for things, and national insurance, right? So general taxation funds the NHS. Well, migrant workers in Britain have to pay all those same things. They have to pay income tax at exactly the same rate as anyone else earning the same. They have to pay national insurance at exactly the same rate as as UK citizens in the same circumstances. They have to pay VAT on things. There are no special tax exemptions for ordinary migrant workers. I mean, there are on rich migrants, but that's because they're rich, not because they're migrants, right? Actually, in some cases it is both, but we are getting rid of non-dom status. So general taxation covers it, but migrant workers, if you're not a UK citizen and you're in the UK, you pay an extra tax, the NHS surcharge. It's not the official name, I forget the official name, but we call it the NHS surcharge. So that's money, that can be thousands of pounds a year, depending on your circumstances, for using the NHS, specifically to use the NHS. So if you're a migrant worker, and you have to pay, there's no choice in the matter. But in theory, you wouldn't be able to use the NHS without it. So they have to pay exactly the same. People may remember in 2020 when MPs across the House, including Conservative MPs, were saying that, you know, we should be letting off frontline NHS workers off the NHS surcharge because, you know, they're going above and beyond during 2020 COVID, going above and beyond, and we're basically charging higher taxes. And even Tories didn't like that. They weren't comfortable with that idea. But Boris Johnson basically said the NHS funding will collapse without it. So Boris Johnson himself, who was quite happy to lean into anti-migrant stuff, was making it clear without migrants in this country, not just working in the NHS, but funding the NHS would collapse. So it's absolute nonsense. Going there, they're horrendous at dealing with reform, but alas, it's why I feel it's up to us individually to fight back against the disinformation. I mean, yeah, we should probably do that anyway, even if they were much better at it, but they are... Maybe practice, maybe they will get better at it now that they are actually starting to more openly dig at Reform UK. Maybe they'll get better. Maybe they'll start to work it out. But the third thing, of course, is splitting of the vote. Now, in Caerphilly last week, what we saw was anti-reform tactical voting. So that's the sort of thing, remember. Again, what happened in Caerphilly, and as long as this happens like in enough places, then we should be fine. Remember, Labour will be more popular at the next election. It won't be possible for people to say Labour are doing literally nothing for ordinary people by then. I think it's a bit unfair to even say it now because you know, they have done some things that have, it's not just, I mean, I talk about the stuff that's passing through Parliament, which is still to come, but some of it was implemented straight away, and some of it's been implemented all the time. But at the end of the day, you can't argue with public perception. If the public are not rating those things very highly, then that is what it is. Whereas, you know, come the next election, energy bills will be, Labour know they need to get energy bills down significantly. So energy bills will be down, otherwise they know they're buggered. Housing should be massively up, like availability of housing and decent housing, affordable housing and social housing. That should be up. That is a tough one, though. That's not as simple as signing a piece of paper, but should be better. You know, things like the Best Start centres, better access to the NHS. All of these things should be better. The migrant hotels issue should be dealt with. The small boats won't be dealt with. Labour seem to think that they I mean, the latest I'm hearing, I mean, but we've heard this consistently as well. Labour are still trying to lean into the deterrent factor. And it's like, really, it's not, it's not going to work. There isn't a deterrent factor that's going to work. MZ saying that particularly these renters' rights developments aren't retroactive. Costs us loads to sort out recurring plumbing problems ourselves this year. Landlord was to manage it himself. Seems perpetually overseas. Yeah, but it is what it is with laws. Unfortunately, it's really very difficult to bring out a law that can be retroactive. The discussion at our CLP was more sober. We had a very clear chat with the MP about bad comms and how we stop pandering to Reform UK and play to our strengths. Maybe they might listen. Even people who recognise the problem, though, it's not like the first step to solving a problem is to recognise the problem. But even for people who recognise it's not a straightforward one. For example, like, you know, it's what they need to do is stop talking about the things that Reform UK want to talk about. I'm not saying you clam up if if a journalist says, "Oh, what about the small boat crossings?" You know, you don't say, "I'm not answering that. Sorry, ask a serious question." No, you must answer it. You mustn't look evasive. But the way I've said, the way you deal with that is to say, "Oh, you mean the Farage boats? Yeah, let me tell you about the Farage boats." But then you move it onto better ground. You know, and don't be afraid. Labour shouldn't be afraid to use the old political dodge. Oh, that's a very interesting question. Quick answer, but I think the real question is this. And then you move it on to workers' rights or housing or the NHS. Move it on, because those are the real issues as well. You're not going to put off the voters, because in all honesty, the sort of voters that I mean, we're not talking about diehard gammons. They're not going to vote for Labour. Labour cannot win those votes, right? You're talking about the ones who are, you know, they've said, we know from polling, it's not me. I'm not one of these commentators who listens to a little echo chamber and goes, oh, this is what everyone else is thinking. I am very, very focused on polling, right? I don't presume to think I know what the public believes based on my interaction with the public, right? Which is very limited anyway. So we know from polling that actually there's a hell of a lot of voters who currently support Reform UK have said they will absolutely vote Labour if they deal with the NHS and cost of living, right? There's a massive chunk of them. Well, Labour are actually dealing. And now that's not to say that when they're finished, they'll have dealt with those things to those people's satisfaction. So I'm not saying, oh, don't worry, it's in the bag. But they are actively working on that. Now, there is another chunk of those Reform UK voters who also expect them to deal with the boats. Well, Labour are, which is silly, because if Labour would just tackle the boat, which they could, if they were to just tackle the boats issue, they could actually have access to those votes as well. Labour seem to be either deliberately or stupidly sacrificing those votes. But then you've got your third problem, which, as I say, is the splitting of the vote. Will people at the next election, people on the left I'm talking about here, will they strategically vote Labour, even though they might prefer the Green Party or the Your Party, to stop Reform UK, or will they be quite happy to see Reform UK in as a way of giving Starmer a punch in the nose? It won't give Starmer a punch in the nose, as I keep saying, but they might think it will. And on that news, some people, I've just seen some people having a bit of a competition. So the Your Party is like open, you can like sign up for membership. There's been people finding that they can get as many accounts memberships as they like for nothing, by the way, not paying a penny. And they can get as many as they like. I've just seen some people having a competition for who can get the dodgiest name through. I mean, there's Phil McCracken's galore in the Your Party now. And I cannot wait until they announce this. It's going to be, don't you worry, it's going to be in the usual suspects, isn't it? They're going to announce these massive number of sign-ups for their membership. And you get access to the members area as well, by the way. You don't have to pay a penny. You can have 10 accounts, 20 accounts, there's no limit. As many names as you can think of, you can have, right? Again, I've watched a WhatsApp group of people having a competition to see who could get the daftest names through. And there's some proper silly ones, right? And so they won't be a strategic problem for Labour, basically, because they can't even manage their own membership. They are going to announce this massive, epic membership sign-up, and then it's going to have to be reported in the news that most of them are just like 12 people having fun creating 100 accounts. So they are utterly incompetent. They're utterly incompetent. They were incompetent when they were running Labour. They had the largest political party in Europe. They had all the infrastructure of Labour, and it was just incompetent, utter incompetence. So, so your party's making the mistake Miliband made, but much more conservatively. Yeah, basically, yeah, exactly that. That'll be fun for some people. Well, it is been. Again, I'm watching people entertaining themselves. I haven't done it myself, I have to say. I'm far too serious. But, again, does it matter that they're incompetent? At the end of the day, they've got a cult-like following, and they will their aim is to pull votes off Labour. They'll be delighted with Reform UK and government, because it means, first of all, it's way easier for them to attack the government if it's a Reform UK government than a Labour government, particularly because they know, although despite what they say in public, they know that Labour are actually delivering a lot of good stuff that they wish they could have done. So they know it's coming. So they'll be delighted, because then they'll be able to attack the government much more easily. Anyone who is on the left is going to have a much easier time on social media or anything, including me. As long as we don't get shut down, of course. But the way I look at that is, do you worry that a really extreme right-wing government might shut you down? It's always a worry. The biggest worry is how they're going to hurt millions of people who are impoverished, though. That's the biggest worry. But the way I look at will they try and shut down left-wing streamers? I look at it and think, well, if you look in America, where Trump has really gone very, very hard on authoritarianism, he still hasn't taken out independent left-wing or otherwise progressive social media stars in America. So I'm looking at America as a trajectory. How soon does he take out anti-Trump YouTubers and TikTokers and stuff like that? And if the answer is never, then it will be harder for Farage to do it than Trump, because although America is supposed to be this land of free speech, it's absolute bollocks. It's America has no free speech rights. That is clear. That is absolutely clear from the way Trump has behaved. So in theory, I mean, I would have thought a few years ago that America had stronger free speech rights than Britain, because it's in the Constitution and stuff, whereas in Britain it's really just, there's some stuff in the European Convention on Human Rights, which is the closest thing we have to a written constitution, like a codified constitution. But it's mostly in just individual laws that are easily changed. So I would have said, yeah, America's got much stronger rights on that. But has it bollocks? Has it bollocks? There's now been a British journalist arrested by ICE in America. Why? Why? For criticising Israel. Not calling for Israel's destruction or anything, just criticising it. That's enough. So the way I look at it is the Constitution in America means nothing. It's all worthless. So again, anyone saying, oh, what we need in Britain is a codified constitution, I would say, do we? How's America's constitution holding up? Very badly, I'll tell you that much. Not at all. Because all you need to do is make sure that you decided who who's on the Constitutional Court, the US Supreme Court, and the Constitution is whatever you want it to be. Whatever you want it to be. And Nigel Farage, although we have an independent judiciary, Nigel Farage could, in theory, change that. Now, again, incompetence might come into the mix because Boris Johnson tried to. He tried to create a political judiciary. But Reform UK, like their latest Tory refugee, Danny Kruger, has already been talking about this. They're going to have policing decided by politicians, and you know it won't be long if they haven't already said it before they're saying they're going to have judges appointed politically as well. So they will certainly do that. A friend took out a TV license as Joe Stalin. He would join your party. Well, that's you could actually have a Joe Stalin, right? I know someone would have intended it as a joke, but you could actually have that. Some of the stuff, I'm not going to read them out. Some of the stuff people have put out there is clearly not a name, right? Joe Stalin can be a name. Stalin's a name, right? There will be people with the Stalin surname in this country. I imagine anyone who had a Hitler surname has probably changed it by default everywhere in the world. But Stalin, you know, maybe some people would change it, maybe not. But there's nothing obvious that flags that. Like a person might look at it and go, hang on a minute, is that real? But, no. Although when you do TV license, doesn't it have to match your payment details or not? Does it not? Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. I can't remember. It's a long time because my wife would sort out the TV license. Now it's her house. I just pay. But it's a long time since I had to manage my own TV license. So I can't remember. But anyway, last few comments. I will be streaming all afternoon from 1 o'clock on Twitch again. Politics Phil. So, but I'll give myself a little half an hour break. But last one here. So Boaty, Jezface and Tarquinson will translate into almost no knocks on doors. I mean, they do have their, you know, they will also have genuine support. I'm not saying everyone signing up is a Phil McCracken or an Amanda Hugginkiss, right? But nonetheless, so they do have a lot of cult support. So they will have people who'll go out and about. The thing is, they'll be so disorganised. They're not going to, they might win the seats they were able to win as independents, like the strong areas. They're not going to win much. But they can still cause Reform UK to win, just like the Green Party can. At the same time, you can't really, I mean, I don't blame the Green Party. They are a party. They've been a party for a long time. They've got every right to try and get as many votes as they want. The Your Party is a revenge party, though. They've got no finer motives. They're not trying to create a new political movement. They're trying to empower Reform UK. Not because they want Reform UK in government, but because they want Labour to lose, because they're butthurt at the fact they lost 2 elections, and then as soon as they buggered off, Labour won, and they don't like that. So they want the satisfaction, the malicious satisfaction of being the ones to bring Labour down. And so it's not, you know, they'd be perfectly delighted if the Green Party replaced Labour, but that's not realistic. The only realistic option is Reform UK. So they'll take that. They'll be happy with that. But there we go. My favourite fake name is Ophelia Minge. Well, that was one of Super Tansky's, wasn't it? Speaking of which, it would not surprise me if that's found its way in. In fact, a little look down the membership list. If anyone was to manually review it as a person and look down it, could be quite interesting. I'll just say that. Could be quite interesting. But we'll leave it there. Thanks for coming on, everyone. Have a great rest of day. I will be, for some of you, on in 25 minutes, but on Twitch. Until next time, I'll see you later.